Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name's Mike Wilkinson. I work for Broadsoft and I'm going to be talking to you this afternoon about unified communications. So hopefully the slides will come up in a second. There we go. Any second now. So the purpose of the discussion this afternoon is just to go through what we mean by unified communications and how unified communications help an enterprise in terms of its productivity. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how unified communications can be deployed and the various different options that are available to enterprises, and look specifically at the advantages of unified communications coming from a hosted environment. So that's my name, so you all know who I am. Right, so in terms of the session today, what I'm going to do is have a little bit of a story. I'm going to try and connect four things together. So I'm going to look at the people behind the technology, some of the technology itself, and then kind of go a little bit left field with a gentleman by the name of Charles Darwin, who came up with the theory of evolution, and then try and link that at the end to a coconut souffle, which is probably not the most obvious thing you think of when you think about unified communications, but bear with me, hopefully we'll get there. So in terms of unified communications today, I've read so many different definitions, and if you approach any vendor in the industry and ask them what do they mean by unified communications, I think you'll probably get as many answers as you ask vendors. And in terms of the question, I went out there onto the internet and looked at Wikipedia, and this is the Wikipedia definition of unified communications, and it's long and it includes lots of different technologies, and frankly it's rather confusing. So what I want to do is just talk about what unified communication means to me in terms of a use case, and then build that up in terms of how you go about deploying it and some of the productivity advantages associated with it. So say I'm out and about somewhere, which is not uncommon. I've got my smartphone with me, and I've got an instant messenger client running on that smartphone. Someone pings me on my instant messenger client saying, Mike, I want to speak to you. So I put a call through to them. So I've changed immediately from instant messaging through to voice communications. Then I'm developing the conversation. I'm out and about, I'm in my car, I get back to my office, and I switch that communication from my mobile phone through to my landline. And the quality's good. I've got HD voice at that point, so we're going to having a good conversation. But as one of the speakers mentioned this morning, well over 50% of communication between two parties will be visual rather than verbal. So I want to have a more in-depth discussion with that particular party. So I switched the conversation from not just being an HD voice conversation, but to being a video conversation. So we're now talking in HD video with HD voice running in parallel and discussing maybe a new product concept or a customer that we want to go and visit in the next month. And we decide that we need to talk about some of the solutions that we're going to put forward to that particular customer or discuss the particular product. So at that point, we move into a collaboration session. So I'm now sharing some of my documents with my colleague, and that's done over a piece of collaboration software. We've still got video running at the same time. And importantly, the transition from each one of these different technologies is seamless for me as the user. So the look and feel's the same, the way in which I move from client to client is the same. And that's the sort of thing that unified communication needs to deliver upon. So once I'm in a collaboration session, I've still got video going, I've still got HD voice, we decide that we need to bring in the customer just to check a couple of things at the same time. So at that point, I then link into Salesforce, which is the CRM system that we use within Broadsoft. And within Salesforce, I can then click to call directly out of the application, linking it through to a conference bridge, which I have linking through to my other colleague as well. So we drop back out of video on our side and just have a conference call with the customer. So that's what I mean by unified communication. You're basically changing the way in which you communicate with one another to suit the business purpose that you're working in at that particular environment. So UC is all about the integration of these various different communication technologies, instant messaging, voice communication, video communication, collaboration activities, SMS, into one cohesive unit for the enterprise. And in the past, that's really only been available to the largest of enterprises, and quite a few of the solutions have been reasonably proprietary in nature. But now we're seeing more and more solutions becoming available to smaller organizations, and the solutions themselves being based around open standards, which allow far more different types of communication solutions to be brought to bear at the same time. So that's unified communications in terms of describing the use case. So what does that mean in terms of the bottom line? What's the benefit to the end user? And I guess you can class the benefit in two different ways. And I think a lot of enterprise business cases look at benefits in terms of what you would call hard benefits, cost savings, and then soft benefits, things like productivity improvements and so on. And a lot of the hard benefits come in terms of lowering the cost of voice communications within the enterprise. Many of our customers, service providers today, are moving to deliver integrated fixed and mobile communications into their markets with one single VPN calling, which basically means irrespective of whether you're on a mobile or a fixed, all your calls are on net, and all your calls run through the same enterprise calling rules. So basically, the IT manager has complete control over communications within the enterprise, irrespective of where that particular person is. And that's a bit of a revelation, because in the mobile world in particular, a lot of those costs have gone uncontrolled in the past. So in terms of some of the soft benefits, I'm a knowledge worker, and there was a study done recently by TechAdvisor looking at the amount of time a day that a knowledge worker like me would take on certain different tasks. And basically knowledge workers go around, they bring in information, they process that information, and then they communicate it again. So for me, being able to communicate with people and different systems is vital. So in a lot of cases, I'll spend up to half of my time every day either trying to find out information or communicate with certain people, or getting communication from people I really don't want at any given time. And that's quite disruptive, and it's not great in terms of productivity. So what I want to do is to be able to mitigate that, to manage it, and improve the productivity that's associated with me as an enterprise user. So there was a study done by the same people who looked at the previous slide, and they did an estimate as to the amount of productivity improvement a particular knowledge worker could gain on a daily basis by using a full suite of hosted unified communications. What they came back with was that in an organization of 50 people, that organization would save in a year, assuming the average cost of a knowledge worker was around $75,000 a year, loaded cost, the organization would save somewhere in the region of $1 million a year. So if you put that in terms of headcount cost, that could be an extra 5 or 10 people a year you gain into the organization in terms of productivity improvements. So unified communications improves the quality of communication of knowledge workers, customer service workers, people who face out towards the customer and either provide service or sell to them and so on. But in terms of unified communications, it's a complex business. You're taking many, many different technologies and integrating them together. So you've got voice gateways, you've got call controllers, you've got video terminals, you've got video managers, all sorts of different technologies which we need to be brought together and integrated. Now, there's various different well-known vendors who can do this for you, but at some considerable expense. And that really limits the opportunity for adoption of these technologies very much into the high end of the market. So if you're a smaller enterprise, how do you go about getting access to the unified communication solutions that we've looked at to date, but at a marginal cost? So you're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a unified communication solution and trying to integrate it yourself. If you look at the average amount of resource available to a particular type of organization, this was a study done looking at the amount of IT resource available to employees within a company, whether by company size. So at the low end, it seems like a good thing that you've got a very large percentage of IT resource available per person. And that's a little bit of what we would call a double-edged sword. It's a good thing that you've got personal service, but what in reality it means is that there's probably only one IT guy in an organization of 20 or 30 people. And that person has to understand all of these various different technologies and try and bring them together themselves. Whilst at the high end of the market, organizations of 500 plus, you've got a very low percentage of IT people per knowledge worker or per employee within an organization, but at the same time you may have more of them to be able to specialize in certain areas. You know, the voice guy, the storage guy, the security guy. So what you need to do is look at ways and means of allowing all of these technologies further down the curve to the 20-person business, the 40-person business, the 80-person business, and so on. And this is where hosted UC comes in. It's really allowing organizations to adopt unified communications, but at a marginal cost, a cost per user per month. So if I'm a 20-person business, I can pay anywhere between $5 and $20 a month for a unified communication service for me to put into my phone system. I can have that maybe at home if I need it, integrate clients onto my PCs, onto my smartphones, and I'm not paying any capital expense associated with it. This is where it brings me to the Darwin, the link. Basically, there's a well-known business writer called Geoffrey Moore, and Geoffrey Moore looks at the evolution of businesses, and his theory is that businesses need to continually evolve to survive in the marketplace they're in, because if you're not moving forward, you're standing still. And as part of that, you need to focus on what are your core activities, what are the things that add value to your customers, and everything else should be pushed aside. Everything else, you can try and reduce the costs associated with it. But how do you get the productivity benefits that have been associated with unified communications earlier, but at the same time focus your business down on its core customers and its core strategy? And that's where unified communication comes in. It allows you to, in effect, outsource the business of communications, because at the end of the day, if I'm running a chain of 20 restaurants, I don't want to worry about communications. I want to focus on providing the best customer experience for my restaurant diners. I want to focus on delivering the best food. So from that perspective, you find that if you have hosted unified communications, you have the ability to take advantage of the productivity benefits associated with all these new unified capabilities from a communications perspective, but not some of the cost implications, the technology risk, and the capital expense associated with it. I was reading on the way over today a report in the Financial Times that says that there's another credit crunch coming in January or February next year. What does that mean? You'll have less access to capital to grow your businesses going forward. So again, you need to take what capital you have within the business and focus it on the core growth strategy of the business. Maybe not spending $50,000 or $100,000 on more communications infrastructure for you to put in yourselves. Go to your service provider, let them do that for you. So let's put this in perspective. This is a well-known gentleman in parts of Europe and North America. His name's Gordon Ramsay. He's a chef, and he swears a lot. That's his raison d'etre. And Gordon Ramsay is also a bit of a TV personality in both Europe and North America. But he's also very well known for running a very large chain of restaurants, amongst them 1, 2, and 3 Michelin star restaurants, one of which is Claridge's in the UK. So Gordon's prime focus is to deliver good food. But what he's not good at is putting together IT solutions. And in fact, BT in the UK ran a series of adverts showing Gordon messing up his restaurant business because he was basically trying to put together a new IT infrastructure for himself. So at the end of the day, Gordon needs to stick to focusing on coconut soufflés and not worry about his IT infrastructure. And that sort of brings us to the final link, moving from geeks through to coconut soufflés. So from a hosted UC perspective, it's all about delivering a solution which will improve your productivity of your workers, reduce the costs associated with it, reduce the voice costs, which we talked about, but also reduce things such as travel costs. In the legal profession these days, in North America, a lot of lawyers are looking at video conferencing for communication with one another, and they're replacing flights as a result of that. I personally started using HD video calling at the beginning of the year after injuring myself playing football, which I know I'm a little bit old to play anyway, but it's what my wife reminded me not so long ago. And I was staggered at how good the quality was. And the difference is, I guess, what I would call conference call fatigue. And those of you who've ever done a 3 or 4 hour conference call will know what I mean. If you're on a conference call for 3 or 4 hours, you eventually switch off. You find some email to do, or you'll end up sort of surfing your website, go onto Amazon, buy whatever you need to do for the weekend. With HD video conferencing, you don't get any of that. You can actually hear the person on a speakerphone as clearly as I'm talking to you now. And so your level of attention is much higher. And consequently, you can hold 4, 5, 6, 7 hour video conferences with ease. It's not the same sort of costs as you would have on something like telepresence, but it's good enough to save yourself a 7, 8 hour international commute to North America, Asia, wherever, and the costs associated with that. So the benefits associated with unified communications start to hit in lots of different areas. It improves productivity across many, many different work groups. You'll find that as one group within an organization sees another starting to use the new technology, they want to use it too. I saw this recently with a marketing group who started using web conferencing, and then the sales support organization saw what they were doing and they adopted it very quickly. And their productivity improved as a result of that. And the other thing you can do then is take the IT staff that you have and maybe focus them in different areas. Focus them on that key new CRM project, the key new ERP project that you're looking for. So outsourcing to hosted unified communications has many, many different benefits. Which brings me to BroadSoft. BroadSoft has been used by service providers across much of Europe for delivering unified communications for 5 or 6 years now. And we're now in the process of adding multiple capabilities into the BroadSoft stable of products, if you will. So we have the standard voice video communication, high definition voice, high definition video, but then partnering that with cloud-based capabilities which our service providers take, rebadge, and then onwardly sell into their enterprise markets. And that's focused around products from the broad cloud stable. So there's instant messaging and presence. There's web collaboration. And there's a range of clients, both PC, mobile, tablet, which link into all of these different capabilities to provide enterprises with a seamless set of solutions to put together unified communication projects. So to summarize, and I think I've more or less stayed within time, which is something of a miracle for me, what we've done is we've talked about the complexity of unified communications, the fact that you don't want an army of IT people trying to put this together with the costs associated with it, the technology risks, and a basement full of wires with more kit consuming power. You want to basically have a simple solution which allows you to focus on your core business. So moving from geeks to souffle is basically the approach that we're advising this afternoon. So I'm well within time. So I think I have the opportunity now to take some questions. I can't see many people because the lights are on me. So if you put your hand up, I will try and see if I can answer a question. If you have any, that is. I don't think there are any. Okay, so I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to me this afternoon. On behalf of Broadsoft, we would like to thank Netia for taking the time to give us this session today, and we'll be available afterwards if you'd like to have a one-on-one conversation. Thank you for your time.
Dobra, to wpuszczaj to, muza.